I'm having my one.
Good morrow, dear listener. Do sit down and be welcomed to our little alcove of the board gaming hobby. The ritualistic audio transcribing of having thine own one was birthed but 33 months from this very date. And as we reach chapter 70 of our chronicle, I am joined in company by three such dramatis personae that have ne'er been brought into alliance since the days of Wallace and the Stones of Blood. Welcome, brothers.
Hello, Governor.
Hi.
Hello.
At this interval of the animation of the One, we are brought in commune to probe the mansions of madness and stare deep into the globe of contrition to weep on the arbitrations of games past. Welcome to the I'm Having My One podcast. Right, well, I'm not doing that voice all the way through this episode, but being far from an expert on the world of Mansions of Madness, or the world behind it, I thought I should contact our friend Stephen, aka Plague Mantle, with whom we did an entertaining interview last summer, episode 52, if you want to go back and listen to that, and ask him if he would be kind enough to write an intro to this game and the world that he adores so much. So thank you, Stephen, for this. It was the balmy summer of 1926. The light Massachusetts winds whistled down cool breezes to soothe the warm brows of the day's enlightened thinkers. And whilst American physicist Robert H. Goddard launched the first liquid-fueled rocket, notable racist and white supremacist H.P. Lovecraft wrote The Call of Cthulhu and brought cosmicism to the masses. Fortunately, he is dead now, and therefore cannot benefit financially from the wonders that story brought the world in the sanity-bending games and tales that would follow in the years to come. Most notable was the Chaosium's TTRPG of the same name, which has kept up with D&D in its repetitive republications over the last 4.5 decades. Call of Cthulhu pits normal human beings against unending horrors from the far corners of the cosmos, illustrating the futility of humanity's efforts to stand against truly terrifying beings from beyond the stars. Always the clock is ticking, always our fragility is underlined, and always the frailty of our minds is tested. The investigators of those stories use their skills to investigate rum happenings, attempt to unravel unworldly mysteries, and battle both insane cultists and the monsters to whom they pay homage. Their hope is ever to slow the progress of the things from beyond the stars and to return to the mundanity of their lives, and pray that there are others fighting against as yet unseen threats to the world. Few survive, but it is a lot of fun fighting the good fight. Today's game, Mansions of Madness, tries to translate the excitement of Call of Cthulhu into the world of board games. So again, thank you to Stephen for that intro to give us some context to our discussion. Stephen actually runs his own pod called A Geek Tragedy, where he brings his good nature and enthusiasm to conversations with his co-hosts Holly and Mark to discuss all sorts of geek culture, including most recently a very entertaining discussion on the Hobbit films that they lay into them. You can find A Geek Tragedy most easily on Spotify, so do check it out. Mansions of Madness first came out in 2011 from Fantasy Flight Games and designer Corey Knizia, who's gone to create so many different games that we all know. Mansions was updated in 2016 with a second edition that sits at number 65 in the Board Game Geek Top 100. The game itself, I think, could be described as a bit of a cooperative dungeon crawler, building on the RPG origins mentioned in Stephen's intro. You play as a team of investigators who are challenged to explore various settings, usually a house or mansion, I suppose, and you're trying to piece together evidence to uncover the otherworldly doings of various baddies. And as you're doing that, you're interacting with things on the board, collecting items and spells even, and of course fighting monsters along the way. We have played this twice recently, or most of us have anyway, and on both occasions, I I think we had a pretty good time of it, right?
Yes. I was pleasantly surprised. I enjoyed it more than I was expecting.
I think it was good.
I think, Tom, you and I both have sort of said that the sort of whole Cthulhu thing doesn't always do it for us.
Yeah.
But actually, very, very, very good. Very enjoyable.
Same. I was quite surprised by it, really. Well, I think maybe we need to pick apart the two different games that we had. Reese, you very kindly taught this game, learnt and taught it to us. So, do you mind just walking us through that first game that we had a little bit, and what the story was of that one?
So yeah, we played Dearly Departed, which it was in a cemetery. Where essentially bodies had started going missing, and we were sent there to kind of investigate. And we're kind of dropped outside, the mansion in the cemetery, and I'm assuming that all of the missions are kind of based around a building that is probably a mansion, given the title. We just had to find out what was going on. So there was a little bit of kind of investigating to find out, where the bodies were going, what was happening with them. And I think it turned out there was some mad lady who was in some crypt somewhere who was
using underground layer sort of thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's it. She was using the bodies to give her power or something. I can't remember the exact story, but we kind of uncovered it. I think we did a pretty good job, and we actually just about completed it, which was pretty good. It's a 5-star difficulty rating, so pat on the back for all of us.
Oh, was it?
I don't think we even cheated to get through it, did we?
Not as far as I can remember.
No, I mean, I remember Tom constantly dropping his weapons.
I got fairly frustrated with this part of it. Is that I managed to get a shotgun early on and did a little bit of damage with it, but then kept getting into this weird loop towards the end of the game where I think you three had managed to all get down to the crypt, and I'd been very slow at doing that, and then was stuck on the edge of it and just trying to fight off all the different zombies and so on that were coming in. But everything seemed to just make me drop the shotgun. And so I'd spend a turn picking up the shotgun, missing, and then dropping it again. I guess I was just not very adept with it. And you can imagine thematically I was shooting this shotgun and the recoil was so much I missed and it shot out of my hands, I suppose. So
I think your character's name was William Butterfingers Yorick.
Old Butterfingers. Yeah, I think Seb, you as well kind of had. I think it was me and you. Anyway, I might be wrong. It felt like we had the lion's share of the beasties to try and fight off in that one. Am I remembering right?
Yeah, we were getting chased around quite a lot, and usually getting beaten up. Whilst Paul went off and solved some puzzles, like the genius that he is. And Reese just set them on us, as far as I can remember. He'd run away. He'd be like, "You've got guns. You can sort this out."
I was pretty much just running around, attracting attention, and then bringing them towards you, and then running away again. Yeah.
It's the little guy in the bar going and be like, "You're an idiot. Did you hear what he just called you?"
Yeah, but I'm impressed though if we managed to do it. If it was and it was the top level of difficulty, because it did seem quite intense. It was a long game as well, though, right? And it was one of the things I wanted to pick up. What do we think about? Just thinking about that first game to start with, the game length. It sort of feels like, even if you understand the game, this could be definitely a whole evening kind of game, right?
Yeah,
I think the game length wouldn't have been an issue if you'd started earlier, because we ended up finishing at midnight, didn't we? Which was a bit too late for
and we probably didn't get going until about 9ish, did we?
Yeah. It was about 3 hours, and it was none of us had played it for a very long time, so it's kind of just getting back into the mechanics and the kind of rules of it, I suppose. So I think we did okay, especially given we were all tired towards the end. But a great. I think I mean, I researched them, the different missions that we could do beforehand, and this is kind of regarded as one of the better ones. I don't think it's in the base game. I think it's one of the expansions that you need to play this, but it's considered one of the good ones out of the lot. And it's very fighty, and I think we all kind of enjoy something that's a little bit fighty, because you do get some of these missions that are much more dialogue based, and not so much fighting, whereas we had zombies coming out of the ground constantly, cultists in the was there some sort of church? I seem to remember there being some sort of church or chapel or something there. So yeah, that I kind of picked it for those reasons. But
wasn't there also, like, at one point there was like an angry mob, and at another stage we had this lunatic who just ran on and was just like waving his arms around with knives, and I think he got me a couple of times.
Yeah,
wasn't that the husband?
The husband
crazy lady who lived in the crypt?
Somebody, yeah.
I think it was the brother. I think it was her brother. And I think that's why she was going through all of this. There was some link there, but yeah, it was a bit chaotic, but I don't know, it was pretty good fun. Had we not been so tired by the end of it, I think all of us were kind of ready for the game to finish. When it got to it. But I think if you put that in a different setting, if for instance, Tom, we all piled round your house on a Friday evening and played this, from kind of 6-7 o'clock, it would be a very different experience. And I think that's probably one of the things we obviously we played it over TTS. We sadly don't live close enough to each other to kind of play in person regularly. And I think with this type of game especially, I think there's an awful lot lost playing over TTS. Right. I think this is an experience game that you should, you kind of get together and that's your evening and that's your game that you're going to play. And I think if you buy into it, if you buy into the characters, and kind of play along with that, I think you'll have a really good time with it. Not for everyone, but I can see why it's highly rated and a lot of people enjoy, this type of game, and particularly this game.
And I think it probably, thinking a little bit of who it's for, its roots that I understand perhaps a little bit more from the general Cthulhu stuff in RPGs. I think probably it is suited to somebody who likes that sort of thing. I think, right, is that if you like a game where you're taking on a character and you could, if you wanted to, dramatize that up, as play out the role as much as you want. I think that's the sort of person this is. You could see people really getting into it on that front, I think.
Oh,
right.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you picked the butler, Tom, on purpose, probably. And we all kind of played
butler ever though. Keep dropping everything. Not the butler you want, is it? Butler fingers.
So we all kind of at certain points gave a nod to our characters' persona or names or whatever it might be. But yeah, I can see a lot of people really enjoying kind of laying into that quite heavily and becoming that person for the game.
Yeah, and making their actions kind of what they're actually doing in the game applicable to that role.
Yeah.
That's
Big
why
part.
Genius.
The Genius, yes.
Wasn't a huge step up then to
just easy to inhabit that role. Absolutely.
Straight into that
typecasting. A big part of the game is the app, right? So we'll probably talk later about comparisons with Journeys in Middle-earth, and it is the same system. They both rely on an app to lead the story, so there's no big book to kind of be flipping through to read the next bit of the story or anything along those lines, any cards that are really doing that. The app does it all and is very good. And I think one thing that it has extra over Middle-earth is the puzzles.
Yes, love the puzzles.
right? Is that
True.
at various stages, it gives you, how would you describe the puzzles? They're sort of logic puzzles, essentially. It's
Yeah.
that a decent description where you kind of
Yeah.
slide these rectangles into the right sections, into the right places, so you can get the item to the goal kind of thing. Some of it's connecting pieces, just making shapes together. Do we like that element to it?
There was some code breaking as well, which was there was a real variety.
That's true. Forgot about that. Yeah.
I was very impressed by everyone else being so good at them. I was extremely tired of doing it. I think you have to be quite on it to be able to do those puzzles. I think maybe not all of them, but there was definitely a couple where I was really scratching my head. But that might have been because I was knackered.
Yeah,
You
I
have
think so.
very young children in your house, though. That is not conducive to being able to think about things.
Yeah, well, yeah, I would agree. I'm not thick. I'm just tired.
Well,
I like them. I like the puzzles. I think they add a little bit to it. They're not too they're not repeated too much, as in, you might only get 1-2 puzzles, maybe 3 depending on the mission length, I suppose.
Yeah.
At least in the games we played. I think they were varied enough that it wasn't boring. It was kind of almost like a welcome break and a bit of a challenge from everything else that's kind of going on. So no, I thought it was good. I enjoyed it.
They are another, going back to your point from before, they are another reason why I can imagine this game being better in person, because if you've got that on an iPad or the computer, you can sort of pass it around to, in theory, whoever is the person doing that challenge, and up to your gaming group whether you do those cooperatively then at that point, or it is that individual, that character who's doing them. We were getting around the app of playing it on Tabletop Simulator by you streaming your that app through Discord, right? Which kind of did work, but it meant that we had to, and it was fine. It wasn't really a problem, but we were having to say, Reese, can you move that bit there? That kind of stuff.
I think as you play the game, you kind of begin to understand what is important, what you need. Like our last game that Seb couldn't join us for, sadly. I mean, that was one where Tom and I were just hunting everywhere for a weapon to be able to take out the monsters, and pretty much anything that didn't look like it had a weapon in it, like piles of papers and stuff like that. You'd just be like, I'm not going to bother with that. I'm just gonna go for this, big locked box over there and hope that there's something that I can swing at someone.
I basically ended up with a butter knife, though. I think.
Although I think it was an easier one. The weapons weren't as good, but I guess if you'd had the drop gun that you had, it might have made it too easy. So I think
it would have been
in the same way, were we?
It would have been overpowered for that scenario. I mean, the first scenario we played, we were having to dispatch quite a few zombies. I'm sure we probably killed about 10-12 zombies in that one, as on top of the cultists and the main lady and her brother and all that kind of stuff. So there was a lot more enemies in that one.
I feel in that second one there was a bit more exploration to do, right? We seem to continue going, okay, there's another room and there's another room and there's another room in that one, where I think in the first one there wasn't quite or so much of that, or maybe it's just because we were 4 players rather than 3. It just meant that we discovered it more quickly, perhaps.
Yeah, I think that's probably what it was, because we had to. Do you remember there were 2 levers that we had to pull, and they had to be in a certain direction. That was like northeast, southwest.
Oh yeah.
And we had to find a journal and read the journal. Like Paul found the journal and read the journal, and found out what the sequence was for that. And so there was a little bit of that kind of going on. I think probably about the same in honesty, but just a lot more fighting and a bit longer on the first game we played.
And I think we've we actually played this, as you said, years and years ago when we first got onto Tabletop Simulator in lockdown, and I didn't really have a good time with it. And I wonder, there's 2 points in this really. One is that, do you think there's always going to be a case with these kind of games where they are very mission focused, that you can have good missions and you have bad missions? There are definitely games like this I've encountered in the past where, you know, for the sake of writing lots of missions, you just have maybe 10 good ones and then the rest that you've got are just boring. So that's, I guess, question number 2. But also then, that's question number 1. Hang on. Question number 2 is whether there's going to be always perhaps actually not that much variety. Because even in the different ones that I've played 3 now, in those different missions that we've done, you're still kind of doing the same thing. There isn't, it feels to me, a huge amount of variety. It's kind of go in, have a little wander around, get your bits of evidence, and then have a fight, and then there's like an act 3, go and sort out the boss kind of thing. So 2 potentially slightly contradictory questions there, but thoughts on either of those? Anybody?
What were the questions?
What were the questions again? I even lost
trying
track.
To decipher.
I even lost track
in that ramble
waffle.
what the actual question was.
So I guess it's that, do you think that these games are always going to suffer from good missions, bad missions?
Yeah.
And also, do you think that, you know, can you imagine yourself playing 10 of these, or would you just get bored of it? Because from what we've seen so far, the missions look, maybe we can't answer because we haven't played it enough, but they look like they are relatively similar.
I mean, this isn't a game that you're going to get out every weekend and play. I feel like this is an event game where, you know, you have a certain group of people who just love this type of game, and you play maybe every couple of months. You might make an evening of it, invite them around to your house, dress up, get into character, you know, whatever it is you're doing. So I don't think it will suffer too much from that. I definitely think it suffers from the good missions, bad missions. I've played some of these missions, and they've been pretty boring, and you're just kind of going through the motions, talking to people, and that doesn't really do it for me personally. I think there was a murder mystery one where, you know, there was just loads of characters and you were trying to work out what had happened. That said, from a replayability, you know, if there are a few missions that you really love, the interesting thing with the expansions and the app, it lays everything out completely differently for you every time. So if you've got a few expansions for this, all the tiles will be different. You know, it won't be the same tiles that you use. It will be the same kind of scenario, but the tiles will change. Some of the locations will change. Some of the characters will change, and even the dialogue kind of changes through the app as well. So, you know, interestingly, it doesn't have to be an exact carbon copy, even if you play the same mission twice, right. which is really, really neat. But yeah, I think so. I mean, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, there's no right or wrong. So it's just whatever you think. All opinions are embraced on this podcast.
Well, those are my thoughts anyway.
I think that there seems to be, or what I've looked into, a variety of different missions. So I think they would appeal to different people. Like that first mission we played, for those that, yes, there were puzzles, but for those that just want to run in and punch things, that was the ideal mission. The mission we played second, for those who want a bit more investigation and intrigue, maybe that ticks the boxes. So having a selection of different missions and that whole good, bad mission, I think would be actually largely subjective. But also, I think sometimes just how you get going early on in the game, because the app gives you random starting items. Mm-hmm. And if you get some maybe good starting items and then have some awful dice rolls to start with, then you're going to be in a really bad place and you maybe not enjoy the rest of the mission, however nuanced and entertaining it would have been.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah, definitely.
I think it is. It's it's an event game, as like Reese was saying, and that it's something that you get every now and again. You have a group of friends around, and you role play it. It's not a campaign, which I think is important that sets it apart from, say, Journeys of Middle Earth, which where you're invested in the further missions. Whereas these are just standalone missions, and you can pick and choose what you want to do. You don't have to do like the thing that gets you to the next place. You can just pick and choose what you want to do. I quite like that aspect, because if you read the description of the mission, you think, well, that sounds a bit dull, or that's not me. Then you don't have to do it. And I quite like that it gives you the freedom to choose, really.
Yeah, that's true. And there are loads. There are expansions and new characters and all sorts for it. It's such a popular game. There's tons.
So many characters. And I going back to the kind of different types of missions, and maybe some being more boring than others, I guess that's subjective. And the nice thing is that if you maybe have a group of gamers that aren't into the fighting thing, you can still play this. And if you do have gamers that are into the fighting thing, you can still play this. There'll be a mission for most people, I think, in here. I mean, I'm not sold on the whole Cthulhu kind of theme and genre as well. It's not. I don't hate it like you do, Tom, but I certainly don't love it. But I do really, I really enjoyed this game many years ago. I think it was it me, you, and Chris, Seb, who played a game of it, and it was just so thematic. Like, one of us went insane, and it was all down to the wire. And somebody
that was the one I missed. That you then told me, "Oh, this is so good, you got to play this." And then we played this boring mission in the world.
And we did, And I think that was the murder mystery one that we played, where there was just like no monsters. It was just going around talking to people.
Really know what I was doing.
Yeah. So, I mean, how do you feel about this game now you've done these two games, having
much better,
only had that other experience?
Absolutely, much better. It is as you had always said, and we just had never returned to it. Oh, you need to do one of the ones where it's got fighting in it, and then you'll enjoy it more. And you're right. I think I'm not a huge role player kind of guy, so I'm not going to get as much out of those. Where it's just a bit of an investigation and chatting to people. I can totally understand why people do. It's just not my thing. But playing this time around, definitely feel like we got a lot more out of it, and was much more interested in it. I think just your point of the theme, and let's just talk about that for a little bit. The theme just doesn't do for me. I'm not sure I quite say hate, Reese, but sure. I've never quite been able to get on with the Cthulhu thing, which, again, horses for courses, isn't it? That whether it does speak to you or not. Like I don't know. Just something about it's just not interested, and it's not like I'm not interested in something that's got some fantasy elements to it. I just have never engaged with this. What do you guys think? Well, Reece, you already said it's not particularly your thing. Seb, Paul, what do you think on the theme?
I'm not really into like horror as a genre in general. Like I'm not into like horror films. So the only kind of horror based game that I really like is Escape Dark Castle, but that's because it's just really silly. I can enjoy that.
And it's quick.
Yeah, and it's quick. It is really quick. It's a quick laugh, and it's a great filler. Whereas, so rather than it being the whole evening of being horror and
with a bit of magic thrown in, that's the other thing about Cthulhu, right? Is that you're right, it's horror, but then there's in both missions we did, at least one of our characters had some spells that they could do.
Yeah, I mean, I'll admit that I've actually never played Cthulhu. I don't know much about it. I'm not invested in that side of board gaming. I kind of like the Mansions theme, but I could play it every week. I couldn't come back to it all the time.
it doesn't grab you, right? And that's the thing that I feel. It doesn't grab me to go like, oh man, I've loved that. I'm really involved in what's going on with those the zombies coming in, but there's a bit of the occult going on. Blah 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 blah. It just doesn't grab me in the same way. Paul, is it same for you, or do you feel?
Yeah, I think
more
we're
or less strong.
Singing from the same hymn sheet, which is a shame in a way, because mechanically this game is brilliant, and actually I love Journeys in Middle Earth, but I would say there are some elements of this that I prefer to Journeys.
Such as?
Well, such as the puzzles, I think are very good. And actually, the fact that there are some standalone missions, I really wish they'd created some standalone missions for Journeys.
Right.
Because I've got people I want to play that game who I know would enjoy it.
You don't want to just play the first mission every time, right?
Yeah. And you can't jump into another mission.
No.
You want to jump into like a big battle, right? You want to go for the two towers, or like you want to defeat Smaug or something like that. You don't have to do the fillers.
Yeah. So I think there are elements of that are great. And for me, if the theme was slightly different, I mean, I enjoyed the game so much. It's gone on to my eBay wish list.
Oh, really? Okay.
Not as anything desperate, but
if it were for a good price, sort of thing.
Yeah, I've got this gaming group I've started on Sundays once a month, and there are people there I know that would enjoy it, and I'd like to take Journeys in Middle Earth down, but because it's not the same people every week, there is no point in trying to play that game, because we would not meet regularly enough to play through the campaign. Now, maybe I need to arrange just a separate time and, over a month or so, have a couple of evenings, and we could, smash out one of the campaign things. I think people might enjoy that. But it's gone on for that reason of, hey, here's something cool, and there's an app which is got some funky puzzles on it and things like that. So, yeah.
So this is, I think, the first in this series of games that was developed by Fantasy Flight into first Imperial Assault and then later Journeys of Middle Earth, which we have reviewed on this podcast. I would like us to come and have a go at Imperial Assault at some point, just to have seen the complete thing, and then we can do a bit of a compare and contrast over them all. But Paul, you've kind of brought this up already with Journeys. And its comparisons. You've played a little bit of Imperial Assault. Any more thoughts on those comparisons between the three games?
So I think Journeys in Middle Earth is brilliant for me because Lord of the Rings and that whole world and everything really appeals to me. I also prefer the skill checks in that because you create at the start of each game you're going to play your deck of cards.
This is a good point.
So you know how many successes and how many failures and how many cards that will be affected by fate are going to be in your deck.
Right.
So if you're paying attention, you also then know how many you've drawn out, and so you feel in a bit more control about
a bit more agency in what you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, especially with the scouting things. Whereas in Mansions of Madness, you're just rolling dice for your skill checks.
Yeah.
And yes, depending on how good your skill is, you might be rolling more or less dice, but you are just at the whim of those dice. So there are a couple of times where there were some really, unimportant skill checks for me to make. If I passed or failed, it wouldn't be the end of the world. And then you come to a point where, and I was absolutely smashing through those. And then you want to punch an enemy in the face, and it's really key that you get a good hit in, and you just roll all blanks.
Yeah.
So for me, I think Journeys kind of has the edge. Imperial Assault, I struggled with. I think the first time I've only played it the once. I know you've played it more, haven't you?
About 3 times, I think. Yeah.
But it was quite a slow first game for me, so
yeah,
I'd be interested in playing it. but what I do like is I like the style, the way these games work.
Yeah.
If something else came out that used the same system, I would be very keen to look at it.
You can see it happening, right? They've gone through with Journeys I think they completed the set of main game and then expansions now. So yeah, you could definitely see it in a very fancy flight kind of way of recycling the system to a different theme. Yeah. Yeah, it's a really interesting point that I hadn't considered. I think I would agree with you on Journeys. There's something for rolling dice. It's quite nice to roll some dice that Mansions have that Journeys doesn't. But yeah, I think I'm overall with you on that.
I think it fits both game. I think the dice works with Mansions because it's standalone missions, and I think the control that you mentioned having Paul with Journeys works because you're maybe a bit more invested in what's happening, especially long term, because it might affect your campaign, right? So I think with the standalone missions, I think the dice are okay, is my opinion. I think they've got their place in Mansions, and I think that works absolutely fine. And I think the card system works better for Journeys for that reason as well. So
very good point. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do like rolling dice though. I do like rolling dice.
Yeah, well, this is it. You were rolling a lot in our last game as well.
I know. I just got a ridiculous amount of dice in that last one. Just bonuses on bonuses on bonuses. Yeah,
you did. You had about 20 items that just allowed you to roll like another 7 or 8 dice. It was insane. It's great.
Okay, let's move on and do some scores then. So let's start with the person first on my screen here, which is Seb.
So I think Mansions is quite good. I don't think it's a game that's perfectly suited for my play style. All my gaming groups play style. I think we all think it's quite good. We quite like it. So I'm gonna give it a 7. I would pick it up and play it every now and again, but I don't want to play it all the time.
Yeah. I like the predictive scores in there as well. So maybe there's something we'll go on and do. Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you. Reese.
Funnily enough, Seb's given the exact score that I was going to give it.
There you go.
A 7.
Good job, Seb.
Yeah, kind of same reasons. You know, it's. I've had great games of it. I've had some really good games, and I've had some boring games. I think it's got a place in a gaming collection for the reasons we've kind of gone over. I think it could work with lots of different groups depending on the missions that you play. And I think if you're into role playing, which I'm happy to kind of lean into, I think you can have a really great time with this. It's a lot of money. It's a big box. There's a lot of stuff in there. But if you like this kind of thing, what a brilliant game to get into, because there are so many expansions, so many characters. But for me, it's something that I wouldn't mind owning and having in the collection, just for that odd occasion where, you had some people around, you're like, do you fancy giving this a go? I think you might like it. So 7 for me personally, but I can see why you'd want it in your collection.
Yeah, I can see people getting into this in a major way, and we said maybe people wouldn't, but I absolutely can see people playing this every week, if that's their thing, if they can create that space in their gaming group. Paul, how about you?
I'm going to go a little bit higher. I'm going to go to 7.5, purely because I think I was very much prepared to give this a much lower score.
Right.
Because not a massive fan of the H.P. Lovecraft world, and it's not Journeys in Middle-earth. It's not hobbits and dwarves, right? So I was all ready to really knock this and be like, no, it's rubbish. But actually, mechanically, I thought it was very, very good. Theme didn't quite do it for me, but actually, if that's the kind of stuff you like, and let's be honest, look at how many games out there have that HP Lovecraft world, right?
Yeah.
It's clearly very popular. There are lots of people. I mean, as we know from Stephen, who did the intro and the interview, he absolutely loves this, and so there is a place in this for probably quite a lot of gamers. So yeah, 7.5.
Very good. Yeah, I think it's higher than I thought you might rate it. So yeah. Where am I on this?
You need to give a score.
Come on, you old miser, spit it out.
Well, look. Let me say to start with, I enjoyed it very much more this time, as I said already. I think I probably would have given it, I don't know, like a 5 previously from our last, or maybe lower than that. Just didn't really get on with it very much at all. So enjoyed it a lot more. I think there are great things that we've spoken about that I'm not maybe just going to repeat what you guys have said. So I agree with it. I kind of miss things compared to Journeys, though. The theme is just so much more meaningful to me in Journeys of Middle-earth than it is here. I do really like the campaign in Journeys. I think for that sort of game where I'm investing that amount of time into it, I love that you can build your character out a little bit, and I think it's somewhat odd that doesn't exist here. I have actually Googled and seen you can get campaigns for this, but for mansions, but not sort of built into it. I think it's somewhat odd that it isn't there already, and you know it's just not Journeys of Middle-earth. I think that's the problem, and it is suffering for the comparison. Unfortunately for the game, the system's exactly the same. So I'm going to go 6.75. It's not quite. I almost wanted to put a 7. I had a 7 in mind, but I think actually more we talked about it over this podcast. It's just not quite there. 7 for me is a game that I enjoy and would want to play semi-regularly. And this one is kind of just underneath that. I'm not happy to play it, but I'm not ever going to say, I think, yeah,
let's play Mansions.
Let's play Mansions. And would never really consider owning it myself, I don't think. Excellent. Thank you. A very interesting discussion on that one. I think we've all enjoyed having a knock around with it in summary, but it's probably not one that we're going to be returning to immediately. As Reese said, it is a big old box. And one of the things that Holly said when we interviewed them last year was that the amount of cardboard in there to unpack to play this game is insane. And it is then got a representative price tag on it. You can pick it up from Chaos Cards for £81.95 currently. So check that out if you're interested. Obviously, you would then qualify for the I'm having my one discount. So have a look at that, enter the code. But for now, let's move on and talk about second chance games.